Picture this. It's 2009, and the holidays are kicking off. Everyone is with family, celebrating their winter holiday. Michigan's roads are probably horrible, and more importantly, sysadmins just got an early gift in the form of Windows Embedded 2009, the latest and greatest versions of Windows for embedded technology. And so, to finish off 2025, let's look at those versions of Windows. Embedded Standard 2009 and Embedded POSReady 2009, and also answer some questions about the embedded versions of Windows in the process. So, let's get started. So before I look at Windows Embedded, I want to go briefly provide some context on embedded systems. According to Wikipedia, embedded systems are basically computers that serve a specific purpose, and usually they either have a custom front end or they don't have a user interface for the most part at all. You've probably used an embedded system in your day-to-day life. Some examples that I'll provide here include mobile devices and gaming consoles, the kiosk at the local McDonald's, and your car's entertainment system. Embedded systems are also kind of interesting in the OSs that are used for embedded technology, and how long embedded systems tend to stick to those operating systems. It is the reason why technically Windows 3.1 or Windows 3.x in general continued to get support up until 2008. OS 2 also served a bit of a niche purpose in embedded systems, being used with ATMs. And there are some operating systems that you've probably never heard of that are quite a big deal in embedded use. Perhaps most significantly, QNX. So now that we have some understanding of embedded systems, let's look at the general history and everything building up to Windows Embedded 2009. So there really isn't much to talk about Windows Embedded 2009's pre-release. Microsoft had dabbled in the embedded world before. A lot of this was Windows CE and not on the desktop. Don't get me wrong, there was still some embedded stuff related to the desktop. Windows 3.x, modular Windows, which was based off of Windows 3.x, and Windows NT 4.0 embedded. It wasn't really until Windows XP that Microsoft started to put a lot more effort into the desktop end of things for embedded stuff, as evident by the fact that Windows Embedded 2009 was not the first embedded version of Windows XP that Microsoft had made. In terms of its development, there really isn't much to write home about because Windows Embedded 2009's timeline was relatively short. There really aren't any leaked builds of these versions, according to BetaWiki, just the technical previews of Windows Embedded Standard 2009, and obviously both Standard and POSReady's RTM builds. A June 2008 article from Ars Technical by Emil Protalinsky said that this preview included technologies found on the latest client versions of Windows and included componentised versions of drivers for Intel's latest processors, the Atom series. Protalinsky also stated that if you are interested in this, you should consider registering for Windows Embedded Standard 2009's virtual launch that Microsoft had planned, and that the vague roadmap for these two versions said that it was expected to arrive sometime in 2008, and it released on the 24th of October 2008. Which means that my introduction was slightly off, but in terms of POSReady, it was apparently released on the 9th of December 2008, making it, alongside Windows 2.0x, the closest versions of Windows released to Christmas Day. Oh, you've got me. Okay, well, Windows Small Business Server 2011 takes the cake there, but it's still released in December, right? Probably shouldn't bang on the desk. Well, on the 12th of January 2009, 10 years before I made my YouTube channel, Microsoft announced at the National Retail Federation's annual convention and expo that Windows Embedded POSReady 2009 was ready to be distributed to clients. Also, their press release for this has a very long and quite capitalized title. Anyway, according to their press release, Embedded POSReady 2009 was Microsoft's embedded operating system optimized for OEMs building POS solutions and enterprise using POS devices. For context here, POS in this case means point of sale, not piece of shit. The press release pointed out three main areas that were of focus: flexibility, seamless connectivity, and reliability and familiarity. And there really isn't much to talk about until Windows XP ended support in April of 2014. At this point, people were concerned because they'd have to upgrade to a new thing. Although some people opted to take refuge in Windows Embedded POSReady 2009 because it continued to get support until April of 2019. And yeah, that leads to, I don't really have much to talk talk about, and eventually Embedded Standard 2009 was discontinued in January of 2019, 2 days before I made my YouTube channel, and POSReady 2009 was discontinued in, again, April of 2019. So let's look at these versions of Windows. I'm going to start with Embedded POSReady 2009, mainly because that's what I focused on first, and I'm going to be using a virtual machine for both operating systems. At first, setup was a bit complicated because VMware did not configure the operating system settings correctly, and as a consequence, made me hate the blue screen of death even more. However, setup is fairly tame, and again, not really much to write home about, so the actual OS uses a Windows XP startup screen, and by default uses a classic login prompt, but you have the ability to change this to the normal Windows XP login screen, because this is one of the few things that Microsoft kept in this version of Windows. Because this version of Windows is very bare bones. The only programs on it include Internet Explorer, Notepad, MS Info 32, which is a system information tool, and a handful of other utilities, and also Windows Explorer, obviously. There's the pre-installed theme of Embedded, and there is no presence of Luna whatsoever, or any of the desktop backgrounds, but oddly the screensavers were kept. In System 32, there's also, obviously, Command Prompt, because that's important, and a very old copy of the Media Player, in addition to Windows Media Player 6.4. The out-of-box experience components were also kept, but they didn't show up here. There's still the ability to listen to the best out-of-box experience in the world, but the only other thing is the presence of the Microsoft Point of Service thing, which I couldn't really wrap my head around very easily, but presumably it's related to kiosks and self-checkout things at grocery stores. I don't know, so I'm only speculating here, and that's Embedded POSReady 2009. It's kind of like as if you fused Arch Linux with Windows XP, but kept Windows XP's interface and some of its programs. So now let's look at Windows Embedded Standard 2009. Is what I would say, because I need to address a couple things here. The first problem is that Windows Embedded Standard 2009, unlike POSReady 2009, is componentized, and by default, really only comes with a skeleton of Windows XP. No presence of Explorer or any sort of shell out of the box, or much of anything. Now, obviously you can add these, but I generally tend to like to cover stuff that is true to the original, and there was another thing that made it not very ideal to cover Windows Embedded Standard 2009 in this video, and that is installation. Windows Embedded Standard 2009's installation, alongside that of its older cousin Windows XP Embedded, is one of the hardest operating systems you can install that doesn't involve compilation of all the stuff. Because, first of all, you need a number of dependencies, and you need to be doing this process on either Windows XP or Windows Vista. Furthermore, the image that you use to install Windows Embedded Standard 2009 is not bootable, and installs a bunch of tools in which you build an image for Windows Embedded Standard 2009. And while I could hunt down a lot of these dependencies, with the time frame I have to produce this video, it's not very feasible. Now granted, this is not the hardest operating system you can install. I know of a thing that would probably be even more difficult to install, but as such, the only real thing to talk about with Windows Embedded Standard 2009 is that it's componentized and is, as a result, modular. But I don't really have much to say about Windows Embedded Standard 2009. And so, that's that. Before I go, I have one last thing to really talk about, and if you've stuck around for a year or two, you probably know what I'm going to be talking about. So, yeah, just sit back and relax. Guess what? I've pre-recorded this because, at this point, let's just make this a tradition to do an end-of-the-year speech. 2025 was a bit of a mixed bag to me, leaning more negatively. The year started out great. There were some potential points that I could have broken out of the small audience bit. Except I made a bit of a mistake in getting rid of the schedule, and I'm still trying to recover from that mistake. Mind you, doing this is kinda hard, and it was easy to establish a surplus back when I did videos where I would point a monitor at a computer or camera and talk about it, but that's not gonna work, and so I'm gonna try to still build up a surplus, and so the start of 2026 is going to be a bit of an uphill battle. 2025 was relatively insignificant to me. Usually there's years where I can point out like, oh, there was this thing that happened that was kind of significant, or these things were significant that happened. Even 2020. I will say this, 2026 will be a big year for me regardless, because I'm going to be going to college, or at least I'm expecting to, and I'll probably be studying computer stuff. To put it simply, 2025 has seen its developments that are beneficial. For example, NASA now exists, a personification of my channel and my online self to a degree. I like the fact that my videos are shorter, or at least relatively short to a degree. They always seem to end up between an 8 and 9 minute range. I don't know why, but I feel like we'll keep these changes, but kind of act like as if 2025 didn't happen. I'm still going to address videos that happened in it, and I'm not going to try to act like it didn't happen, because it did, but I just want, like, to go to a clean slate. So, yeah, I've got to get to work now. I'm hoping that if you see something in a couple weeks from now, that I've gotten something off the ground again, and hopefully I can fix all the problems that I opened in 2025. I'll just leave it at there, so thanks for your support and watching all the videos this year. Hopefully 2026 is better, and yeah, I hope you have a nice rest of your day and rest of the year, and happy holidays. So, yeah.